All right, guys. Well, happy Community Manager Appreciation Day 2016. As a community of community managers, we've been celebrating this for 7 years now, ever since Jeremiah Owang said, hey, let's take a day, in fact, probably the fourth Monday in January each year, and recognize community managers all over the world and call it Community Manager Appreciation Day. So here we are. We've been doing these live broadcasts for 4 years. 24 hours worth of broadcast for the last 3, and also for the last 3 years we've been working with the community to nominate one another, as well as sponsors to help purchase some awards and some swag and other cool stuff. And this year we had over 300 nominations, and so way to go, guys. It was a record year for nominations, and it was really cool just to see all of the great new faces and faces that have been around that had some well-deserved comments about them. My name is Brew, the Director of Awesome with BTC Revolutions and co-producer at My Community Manager Hangout, and just really super happy to be here.
Yeah. Oh, hi, everybody. Kristen Cardos. I work with community at Convince and Convert and for V3 Broad Suite, and I also get to help out with the CMGR Hangout chat every Friday with these guys.
Hey everybody, I am Sherry Rohde. I'm the community manager at Magento and co-produce CMGR Hangout in my CMGR.
Oh, hey everybody, I'm Rachel Miller. I'm a social strategist at Pure Matter.
Hey guys, I'm Barak. I'm the founder of Amplify Your Biz, and I am the community manager for Meshfire here in Seattle.
Hey guys, I'm Dom. I am a project and community manager with BTC Revolutions, as well as co-host on Fridays for the CMGR Hangout with Brew and Sherry. Right off the bat, I know Brew mentioned our award sponsors. We have just a wonderful list of sponsors who really just went above and beyond and helped us make sure that these awards and everything that went into production of today went off without a hitch. So I want to give them a big shout out. Meshfire, Igloo Intranet, Amplify Yourself, socialmedia.org, communitymanagement.org, Zoom, Vanilla Forums, Sprout Social, Online Community Results, Higher Logic, Salesforce Community Cloud. Thank you so much for what you guys did. We are about to. I'm about to announce the last award that we are going to give away this year. But before I actually do that, I wanted to give a shout out to our actual awards committee. They combed through all of those 300 nominations that Brew was talking about, and they really just amazing people. I had the pleasure of being able to work with them this year. So shout out to Carrie Jones, to Rachel Miller, David DeWald, Jackie Musgrave, Blaze on the panel right here, Kristen Cardos, as well as Hillary Boucher. You guys are true rock stars, and I had a great time chatting with you about awards this year. And so the last but certainly not least, we have the CMGR Choice Award, a Lifetime Achievement Award for the person nominated the most by fellow community managers. So I mean, we were talking like a real who's who of community managers. And so the 5 finalists that we had this year were Tim McDonald, Joe Cothrell, David Spinks, Blaze Grimes-Viort, as well as Bill Johnson. And if I can get a drum roll here for the very last award, it goes to the leader of this panel right here today. Congratulations to Blaze Grimes-Viort. I know you're shaking your head down.
Oh, thank you.
It is very well deserved. So everybody get on Twitter during this panel, blow up his feed, and yeah, congratulations, Blaze. You really deserve it, man.
Well, thank you. I can think of 4 people ahead of me who should have won it.
All right, guys, so we are at hour 18 of 24, succeeding in social media within regulated industries. So sit back, put on your seatbelt, and Blaze, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, so hopefully you can hear me okay. Lots of nodding, that's perfect. So thanks everyone who's joining us and listening in on this panel. What we're going to be talking about is highly regulated industries such as healthcare, banking, pharma. We also include insurance, finance, and alcohol in that, and tobacco, which won't be represented on this panel. And all of these entities have regulations that govern their social media activities. So in digital and social media, every action and conversation and brand response is immediately visible, as we know, and most times recorded publicly. And these companies have unique challenges when figuring out which regulations apply and how to manage these regulations and remain compliant. So for those that work in regulated industries, it can feel like an impossible task to manage a successful social media plan. Now, recently I came across a case in the UK's pharma regulator's website that dates back to 2012. An Allergan social media manager responded to a tweet relating to Botox, which I'm sure most of you know, via the public @ reply in the process of doing so, which seems pretty innocuous. Now, it happens to be that in the UK, you have to respond privately to issues pertaining to prescribed medication. So an accidental click on an @ reply rather than a private direct message option got them in hot water with the regulator. And for me, this illustrates why regulated industries are the last great bastion for social media to conquer. And we are awash with social media strategies, content ideas, and engagement methodologies, but these are often found lacking in the face of regulatory limitations. So we will be investigating how alcohol, pharma, and finance companies address and overcome these challenges to be successful on social media. And to do this, I'm very grateful for our panelists joining us. So I'm going to go through each of them, and they can do a very quick introduction so we know a bit more about them, and then we can get on with the questions. So first off is my co-host and colleague of mine at eModeration, Lisa Barnett, who has helped many of our financial clients with their social media efforts.
Hello, and thanks for that invite, Blaise. So yes, I work at eModeration. I've actually come from the community business, so I've been in communities for about 15 years now. I've done a lot of B2B communities, as well as the B2C ones. So thanks very much for having me today.
Great. So next up we have Tammy Boards of Brown-Forman, an alcohol company you may know from their brands Jack Daniels, Finlandia, and Southern Comfort. And Tammy's experience just blows my mind. I mean, she's worked on social media compliance, participating in the task force that instituted the digital marketing guidelines for the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, the European Forum for Responsible Drinking, and the Alcohol Beverages Advertising Code for Australia, so the full suite. And she was also instrumental in working with Twitter to implement an age verification mechanism into its social media platform. So welcome, Tammy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thrilled to be here.
Brilliant. We have Danielle Shearing, who designs social customer services solutions for clients in the financial sector, such as Barclays and MBNA, joining us from the UK. Hi, Danielle.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. I think you said it very well, Blaise. Thank you. Yeah, I'm out in the UK, and I pretty much just do social customer service, and banking is my specialist area, so that's what I'll be mainly talking about today.
Brilliant. And we have Monica McMahon, I hope I said that right, who plans and executes digital marketing campaigns for clients in the pharma industry, such as AstraZeneca.
Yep, that's correct. So I work for an agency, Large Media, here in the States. We're based out of the Catskills in New York, and so I'm going to talk about the trials and tribulations of working with pharma on social media.
Brilliant. Unfortunately, we were supposed to have Ryan on the panel, but as it's just one of the perks of the job, she's dealing with a client crisis, so I couldn't join us, unfortunately. So without further ado, I'll get stuck into my first question to the panel, and I'd like to start off by addressing this to Danielle. There's no doubt that highly regulated companies tend to avoid social media because of compliance or legal concerns, and it is a challenge for many of our clients. What would you say the top 3 things regulated brands should consider when creating a social media management strategy?
Okay, in my experience, probably the first thing I would do is make sure that you bring legal and compliance into conversations from the very start. It's tempting to sort of think, oh no, we'll let them know what's going on later down the line, but you really need to hear them and start to address their concerns, because actually their concerns are very real. It's their job, you know, they're there to manage risk, and you need to really define appropriate ways to manage them from the off. The second thing I'd say is you really need to get on top of the compliance requirements for social yourself. You can't really rely on the risk team to own that element. You need to have a really solid understanding of what you can and what you can't say if you're actually going to design a strategy and create effective processes, governance and training and so on. The third thing, I would say plan for exceptions. Think about how you'd handle a data breach, what you do if a reputational crisis arose, or if there was a compliance issue. Work out in advance how you'd manage that, and make sure you build it into your agent and your community manager training. Don't just assume you can leave that to the PR team. You really need to be on top of all of that stuff.
So Tammy, you've been with Brown-Forman for 22 years, I believe, so you must have seen all of this evolve. I mean, what has been your experience, and what are your thoughts on that particular question?
Yes, I have. I was put into this position when social media became very popular, and Facebook kind of started in 2006 and 2007 for brands. It has been interesting because our industry is so highly regulated, and we as alcohol suppliers want to make sure that we are only marketing to legal drinking age consumers. So it's really a two-way street for us. We work very hard to make sure that every platform that we put a brand presence on meets the demographics of a legal drinking age audience. That is different from country to country, but there is a set demographic that we look for, and then once we know that demographic, then we have to determine how we're going to, what we call age affirm consumers. How are we going to know that that person on the other end of that post is of legal drinking age for us to interact with them, because we don't want to interact with an underage consumer. So I have to take all of those things into consideration. I've worked closely with Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Pinterest, and anyway, it's been very interesting. But what Danielle said about the guidelines and the education is vital.
That's great. And Monica, what's been your experience with the pharma industry?
Yeah, I was going to say what Danielle said is exactly correct. Definitely getting to know what the regulations are within your industry. We've worked closely with AstraZeneca to help them implement their internal strategies on launching any new social campaigns. So we have worked closely with them for a couple of years now on how they can handle internally. So my second suggestion was going to get to know your legal team, because you're going to have to be in constant contact with them over everything, and definitely getting them involved early and as often as possible. We would have weekly consults with them just to make sure that we were continuing down the correct path, and so we didn't have to double back and change anything. And then lastly, I would definitely consider how this looks from a consumer standpoint. For pharma, it's really hard for us to be on Twitter. The 140 characters just doesn't allow for us to properly state all of the risks and benefits of a particular drug or program. So we have to, take a look at what does this look like from a consumer standpoint, and does it make sense? So a lot of times we have to negate some of the most popular social media sites just because it won't work for our consumers.
Hmm. And Lisa, they all feel like very complete answers, and I'm just wondering if you have anything to add to that.
I'll try. Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree about getting legal and compliance on your side. Unfortunately, they are the sort of people that you need to talk to for this. I guess it's sort of, just to pick up a little bit on what Monica was saying, it's about deciding what are you going to use your social media for, and what is appropriate per each channel. Sometimes you may want to use the channel as an awareness, but that might not be what your customers are. So it's always about setting out your objectives to make sure you're going to achieve what you're going to do.
Okay, so Monica, I think you mentioned about the Twitter character limitation. You guys must be very happy if Twitter were to extend that limitation. Particularly in terms of lowering inherent risks, which obviously all these regulated industries have unique needs that need to be addressed outside of standard social media policies. So how do you actually navigate that landscape and minimize risk in the process?
Personally, we set up kind of some teams of people. Like I said, we would get together with our legal consult as often as possible, but we set up teams of people who made it was their job to understand and know what was happening in every kind of area that we were delving into. And so one thing that we learned is that, we had to get all of our responses to consumers pre-approved. So if somebody comments on a Facebook page, I need to get whatever I reply back to them approved. And so we actually would go through the process of trying to decide what people would reply to us and how many different variations could we reply back to them. And so we ended up coming up with a bunch of responses that made it seem a little bit more personal so that the consumers would know that we had heard them. So instead of generalized just saying yes or no, we would try to expand upon that, and then a lot of people like to share their own personal experiences. So when people respond with something like my husband is on this drug or my sister has this disease, we would cater responses to show with them that we had heard that they were talking about somebody else, not themselves, and then even as far as different pronouns for everybody. So I think just trying to think outside the box and come up with every outcome beforehand is key in creating one of these successful programs.
I mean, Danielle and Lisa, I mean, for the finance industry, to me it seems like it's maybe a little bit less risky to communicate in a slightly more free-form manner than have standardized responses. Would you agree with that?
I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I mean, obviously, you can get completely clobbered with a huge hefty fine if you get it wrong, but I think for me as well, it's about a mindset piece. I mean, if you're in a regulated industry, that regulation exists to protect consumers, and that sort of implies that you've got a duty of care for your customers. So, I think there's a tendency in banking, for example, to think that that's something that shuts down social media, or that you've got to limit your social media to sort of chit chat and reactive servicing, that sort of thing. And actually, it's quite a big opportunity when you think about it, that duty of care. So if I was navigating the landscape, if it was my brand, my bank, and I was doing it, I'd be tempted to sort of say, okay, well, that is my strategy. I'm going to provide content that educates, informs, and sort of protects the customer. And I'm going to use social, digital, and so on to start actively looking for ways to make better customer outcomes, using those new technologies to do good stuff. Sure, you've got to know, what compliance and the regulations say you can and can't do, but I think it's too easy to get shut down, and actually it's a massive opportunity for having great customer outcomes.
I mean, Lisa, just staying on finance before we move on to alcohol, based on the clients that we've worked with, would you say that's a similar situation? I mean,
Yes,
is there a difference between different financial organisations in their appetite for risk, shall we say, or how they approach it?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. There is that different sort of, as to what's acceptable. I mean, sort of, Barclays in the UK is a great awareness example of just some of the stuff that they've done with their student, and just, well, they've got the two scales. You've got the students and educating them on what they need to do, and then also you've got the silver surface. So they've really tried to sort of story tell and get people engaged that way, rather than just, hi, here, we're Barclays, we want you to, come and buy our products, which obviously they couldn't do anyway.
Okay. And Tammy, I mean, something Danielle mentioned, the duty of care, I just wanted to bring that up with you, specifically around alcohol. So, I mean, how does an alcohol company approach that? Is it a particular risk factor?
Oh, absolutely, and therefore we have very strict regulations around where we can have branded accounts. And I mentioned that earlier. Probably would be better to talk about it here. But determining, the demographics and making sure that legal drinking age audience is the majority of the audience. And then once we can have an account on a particular platform, how do we use that account? Can we determine how old the consumer is that asks that question? On Facebook, Facebook is by far our gold standard for a partner. They actually created a configuration for the alcohol industry, and we can configure our pages as alcohol, and therefore only those consumers with the date of birth in their profile that is of legal drinking age in their country can even see our pages. So we feel very comfortable that with Facebook we can interact with those consumers one-on-one, answer questions, run promotions, do all kinds of great things, and get to know our consumers. Some of the other platforms like Instagram, I'm working with Instagram right now. Instagram does not have a way to age affirm consumers. If you sign up for an Instagram account, you get an email address and a password, right? That's what they ask for. So therefore, we're not permitted to interact with consumers on Instagram. So we have to use it like a big electronic billboard and build awareness for our brands, but we may not, under any circumstances, interact with consumers one-on-one. So from platform to platform, that's some of my job, is figuring out how the platform works, how we can use it in a compliant fashion, and then I take my findings to our legal department. I present them, and then ultimately the legal department, as everyone has said, determines whether we will actually have a presence on those platforms. So risk is huge.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. I'll start to kick this off with Lisa for a change. So banking and healthcare industries have access to confidential materials and must be cautious with providing information online in order to stay compliant with regulations. This privacy extends to the information that their employees may be posting about the company or the industry. So how would you go about maintaining control as a brand over this, and what are the biggest challenges with that?
So for me, this is where training comes into everything, and training your social media team. So you should ensure that all staff are trained before they even touch anything at all. It's sitting down, it's going through the course, it's making sure that they're 100% clear about what they can and can't say. I would also suggest that there are assessments, regular assessments. There's always refreshers that actually go on as well, because we really need to make sure that the staff are 100% compliant about what they're actually saying. It's writing everything down. I know it's really boring, but processes and documentation, it's what we all have to abide by, and we just can't afford to get these things wrong. And I guess another thing is probably worth having an audit trail, or knowing what the process is if you ever get into any sorts of problems.
Okay, Monica, for the pharma industry, I mean, we have some clients in pharma, and obviously we get exposed to a lot of this through the required training. So I was just wondering if you could give us some insight on just how intense that is in the pharma industry.
It is pretty intense. Anybody that is involved with any of these clients in pharma, we do have to go through training, and you have to get certificates proving that you've taken the proper courses and you've passed, and you have to do it every so often. Sometimes it's a couple times a year, sometimes it's once a year. So we have to ensure that we have a staff ready that has taken those tests and completed those certificates and are available to answer questions. Some other things that we do is, documentation, like she was saying. We come up with house rules. We come up with, very clearly defined process on how you reply, what happens if you find a comment, kind of the process you have to go through. And so it's a very long, drawn out community management training, and so any person involved needs to know exactly everything. So it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of documents. I can't even tell you how full my Dropbox is of all of these different documents that I have to share with everybody. But it's something that we have to do.
And thank you. And Tammy, from your experience, I mean, particularly, it's obviously not, I think we touched upon in the previous answers on training the social media team specifically, but certainly my impression is that it goes far beyond that, and any representative of the company who may be active on social media probably does need some level of training. I mean, what is Brown-Forman's position on that? Or yours, arguably.
Right. So So Brown-Forman would prefer that our employees and those that work for us in the capacity of, say, PR or what we call brand champions who are out maybe in the field and in the bars and the nightclubs promoting our products, we ask them not to promote our products on their own social channels. And mainly that is because, we have individual accounts, and those accounts many times are where family shares, vacations and kids' soccer games and all kinds of things that would not be appropriate to place alcohol content around. So our employee policy states that we do not prefer that people do post about our brands on their social channels. If they do decide to do it, of course the company can't stop them, but we are pretty strict around enforcing that they must disclose that they work for the company if they're going to do that. So it is something that we would prefer, and it's just it's adult content, and it shouldn't be shared in places where families and things like that are shared. So.
And I'll second Tammy there that we actually have a contract in place. Anybody who works with us on these accounts, we're actually not even allowed to like the pages on Facebook or follow the accounts on Twitter. We have to explicitly say that we're not involved. We're not allowed to share anything about it anywhere.
Wow. Okay. And Danielle, just a slight reframe of that question. I mean, in your position, as your experience as a consultant, I mean, what would you say the main challenge for clients in operating in regulated industries is, from your experience, in terms of making sure their staff are fully trained?
I think really it's about understanding where the risks really are. I think that for example, in financial services, certainly it doesn't appear that it's as onerous as it is in pharma or the alcohol industries. But that question, for example, about posting confidential or non-compliant information. Actually, if you've got a good strategy in place, you should be pre-planning a lot of content. You should be getting it, checked by your compliance officer before it goes out. Yes, day-to-day engagement is harder to manage, but in reality, how often is the agent going to get their hands on something that is non-compliant and just post it up? It sort of doesn't happen. So, I think training, like Lisa said, is absolutely crucial. But I think a lot of it is the fear is probably the biggest challenge. The fear and the sense that compliance is some beast that no one can really get to grips with or really understand. And actually, I think you can go through it and you can make sense of it, and you can still come out with a working model that gives you good service for the customer.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, well, we're going to move on to content now. I'm not going to quote the full list of acronyms. It's on the website, but obviously there is a huge amount of guidance around what is acceptable and compliant, rather the term should be. So compliant content. So how would you recommend that brands meet the challenges in making sure that all the outbound content meets those established standards? And I'll start with Tammy this time, please.
What I do as someone, I think Monica said this, the time is absolutely incredible. The time I spend with every market. I conduct training sessions 24 hours a day with all of our markets around the world. Anyone that would be touching a social media channel or account, they go through at least a 90-minute training session. I have developed guidelines for each and every platform that we are approved to be on with what they can and cannot do. It is, we monitor, we have a social media audit once a year that our internal audit department conducts to go out and make sure that all of our community managers, we have well over 380 community managers around the world for all of our brands. So as you can imagine, I can't police all of that, but what we did do this year, which is kind of interesting, is we have now decided that we need refresher training. So now we're coming back around starting in January, and for those people that went through training last January, We're having them go back through training. So I think it's just, it's an ongoing process. It never ends. And the more you can educate, the more you can talk about it, and the more they hear it, I think the more they understand and realize how important it is.
And just an additional question on that point. I mean, if you were to really top-level summary for the members of the audience who don't have the energy or the time to comb through the advice, the regulatory advice, I mean, what would you say are the core considerations when creating content for social media in the alcohol industry? Things that people absolutely have to know.
Oh gosh, I mean, the things that you have to know. You have to be responsible. You must promote responsible drinking. That's a number one. We require that at least 25% of all of our community managers' posts are responsible drinking posts. Make sure you remind people to designate a driver when they go out with their friends. Make sure you remind them to, drink responsibly and use our products responsibly. That's the number one thing I think that people should take away. We should not ever have any content on any of our channels, even if it is secured, that would attract an underage consumer. And there are strict penalties and financial penalties that we can encounter if you have a scene and it's the holidays and you have your adults at a party and they all have Santa hats on. Guess what? Santa attracts underage consumers. We can't have Santa hats on adults at a party. So, I mean, we have to watch everything. We cannot permit anyone to talk about how our products could make a person feel. I mean, we actually have our community managers submit content calendars on a monthly basis to our legal teams around the world, and they comb through those calendars for the next month, and that way they look ahead to make sure that the content is appropriate. Our photos, we have to make sure everyone in the photo it looks to be of legal drinking age. We usually go above and beyond that as well. So there are so many things that we have to be so careful with.
Okay, and Danielle, I mean, I've certainly heard of quite a few, banking companies that have incurred large fines for the content they've promoted. I mean, what would you say, again, for finance specifically, are the core limitations, shall we say, in what content they publish?
Well, I mean, I think certainly in the UK, the main limitations or the main regulations around content are around promotions and disclosures and endorsements. Pretty much, I think, if you steer clear of those sort of three areas, you're okay. And again, it comes down, back down to those three things that you need to get right: the strategy, the planning, and the training. I'd argue that as a financial service, you probably shouldn't be doing an awful lot of sales type stuff on social media anyway. If you're going to be doing it, you plan for it well in advance, you get it signed off by your compliance team. If you need to do sort of more agile, ad hoc content, to sort of, capture a news hook or an event or something, it should be much more the lifestyle type of content. You shouldn't be going anywhere near a promotion or an endorsement. And again, you train your agents, they should know what constitutes an endorsement. They shouldn't be retweeting anything that could be considered as such. It's not impossible to do, but they're probably the areas that are the biggest pitfalls, and they are reasonably easy to avoid, I think.
Okay, Monica, for the pharma industry, I mean, it just so happens I was researching a proposal today, so I'm at least fully aware of the UK limitations. It does seem to be very, very difficult to publish anything for pharma.
Yeah, and it certainly depends on the type of drug you're talking about. They all have different kind of regulations around specific types of drugs and what you can and can't say. One thing that you have to be very careful of is you always have to share the risks along with any benefits that you share. So think of any pharma commercial that you've seen recently. They always show, somebody and they talk about the benefits of the drug, and then there's at least as much time dedicated to the risks. And that is something that you have to carry over to social as well. So that does make it a little bit tougher on creating, a content calendar that is something that people want to look at. So that is, it does make it hard. And as Tammy said, we create content calendars that are 2-3 months in advance, and then every couple weeks we go through and create more content. And it takes a lot of time because the back and forth with legal and making sure that the proper risks are shown on the posts that need to be there. It takes a lot of time.
And Lisa, I mean, you have quite a lengthy editorial background. I mean, do you have any examples of particular challenges that you've had in your career with regulated industries and content production?
Yeah, probably all my content being thrown out at once, but yes. I mean, I think that's the one of the things is, and I know we've talked about legal and compliance, but with one of the content, when we were working with somebody to get the content calendar to make it a lot easier, we actually used to sit down with compliance each month and we'd go over it, so that, yes, I know we're sort of working quite far in advance, but I think that was the trick, to sort of trying to understand what compliance wanted from us and also how we could talk to them, because it has to be a bit of a two-way street on that. I mean, the other thing about it is probably investing in the right tools to make the approval process a little bit easier. I know we all love spreadsheets and they're really easy to do, but sometimes just the easier approval process, or just having too many different versions of the spreadsheet, and if it's passed around a few other people, you kind of go, well, which is the right one? So sometimes maybe it's worth investing in that tool.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay, I'm going to throw this one to the floor, so anyone who feels they would like to answer it, do jump in. The impression, I mean, I think things are changing, even in pharma, but it does seem that historically many regulated companies do opt to play it safe by allocating their marketing efforts elsewhere instead of social media, and understandably there are big fears of getting it wrong. Now, if we think to someone who's maybe starting out in the industry, or maybe 1 or 2 years in a regulated industry, what sort of advice would you give a social media manager navigating these waters to get key stakeholders invested in their social media plan? And anyone who's got an answer to that is welcome to jump in.
Well, I think Danielle said it earlier regarding, being kind of fearful of the compliance. You need to, that's a guideline, but that shouldn't scare you away. And I think, some of these people that are just getting industry, they have a lot of ideas, and so I think, as someone that's been in there a little bit longer, we shouldn't just constantly tell them no. I know that is something that's really easy for us to do, saying no, that won't work, but Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everything is changing every day. I mean, tomorrow we might be able to use Twitter as a platform in pharma in a more easier way. So I think that, listening to new ideas or revisiting them is never a bad idea. So I don't think that, I think it's a lot easier these days for somebody new to get in and kind of bring fresh blood to the industry.
And I know, this is Tammy, I also know that, all of our digital efforts flow through me before they get to our legal department. So Monica's right, things change all the time. And one platform may not work one day, but next week it may. So that's part of my job, is to make sure that I'm watching all of them and working with them to know what they're doing and to make sure. As far as, our DISCUS organization, which is the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, and these governing bodies that Blaise mentioned early on, they really help, I think, new people that are new to the industry, because the guidelines are developed. They're all published. We're there to help each other. That is something that we do in the alcohol industry. I share my guidelines with smaller brands all the time, worldwide. I share everything I've learned. So we make it more of a community effort to make sure that all alcohol brands follow the appropriate guidelines. We would much rather that be the case than have some out there that don't, although there are some that choose to not abide by them. But we're always there to share information.
Yeah, I think, Tammy, you're also a good example. When the social networks don't have a system, just go in and kick them about a bit and get a system in place for age verification or whatever it is.
I have been known to do that.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very valid methods for any career progression and development. Okay, well, I'll skip on to the next question. I'm just very conscious of the time slipping away from us. I want to talk customer service response plan, and specifically, I think this term may be new to some members of the audience, but I think probably not, well, definitely not to any of you. Adverse event training and certification in pharma. Basically, what things do you consider when putting together a successful customer service response plan for regulated brands? And I'm talking real detail here. I'll direct this to Danielle for finance, and then we'll move on to Monica.
Thanks. Wow. So, I usually start with the overall strategy and vision for the social servicing, and we use that to define the workflow processes sort of down the line. And really that's a case of just trying to think about every exception, every likelihood or anything that isn't particularly likely as well, you know, and actually planning for that. So we'll end up with outputs that'll be huge workflow flow charts, for example, you know, if this happens, do that, if this happens, you know, contact this person and so on. We'll have reams of governance, so it'll be things like risk models, it'll be things like balanced scorecard for crisis assessment, and then off the back of that we'll create sort of usable guidance materials, so things like playbooks for agents, tone of voice guidance, engagement guidelines and so on, and within that there'll be all sorts of other things, so how do you respond in different situations, when do you respond, how do you triage, and you've got to consider things as well like how you're going to use the tools that you've selected for social media management, how you're going to tie them into existing systems, your CRM, you know, what's the archiving look like, you're going to have to keep all these conversations if you're going to be compliant in that regard, how do you handle difficult customers, how do you measure stuff, and how do you maintain a quality framework. I think also it's a really good idea to have up your sleeve a really robust agent selection and accreditation and process and training plan as well, because once you've launched, you know, you're going to have to scale, and you know, you really need to get things in place so you can scale quickly, because there's a pretty big risk if you can't scale to meet, you know, the volumes out there. So you need to have that plan. I think another thing that often gets forgotten is planning for crisis. So crisis identification, crisis management planning, training, simulations, so on. Again, leaving it to the PR team just isn't going to work. You need to get your agents actually trying it in real time. You know, the social media crisis is pretty fast and pretty stressful, so the agents need to be prepared for that. One thing I would add as well, I think one thing I try and set with all my clients is a guiding ethos for the servicing, and it can sound a bit trite, but it works really well. I like a phrase that underpins all the activities. So it might be something like, you know, treat the customer like their family. So typical example, but I think setting an ethos is really useful because it gives a sort of compass for the agents and their day-to-day activity. You know, you can have all the guidelines in the world, and you know, you have a big stack of documents sort of this sort of high, but when the client, when the agent needs to make a decision about sort of how to handle an issue in the moment, having an ethos or a sensibility to fall back on and how they should behave can be really powerful. So I think that's always a good thing to have as well.
So for us with pharma, it was a little, I mean, I will say a little easier in the fact that everything, every response that we were able to reply had to be pre-approved. So we weren't able to go off script. We weren't even able to go off script enough to tag the person that had commented. So we were very regimented prior to anything. So it just came down to more of what you mentioned in your question of adverse training and making sure that every community manager had gone through the proper training and had the certificate after that training. And so a lot of that was actually involved with, you know, if somebody mentioned it didn't even have to be about our drug, but about any drug that they had seen, they had headaches afterwards, or they got dizzy, or, something else happened to them. We had a phone number that we had to call, and we had to report it to them. And not only that, we had to take a screenshot, and we had to send it in and make sure that everyone was properly aware that this had been commented on our page at this time, and we had to do that every few hours. So it took a lot of training on making sure the community managers knew that process, and that was, a little bit harder for us to ensure that, as opposed to just being able to give them a spreadsheet of responses when, when somebody says this is how you reply. So that took a lot of time, and we had to ensure that we had the people available, and we had to monitor this page 24 hours a day for 7 days a week. So that became, it was very time consuming to ensure we had enough people available at all times.
Yeah, I bet. Tammy and Lisa, I mean, I've got 30 seconds to finish on this question. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, we are nowhere near to the level that Monica. We do monitor and moderate our pages Monday through Friday. We have to take down inappropriate content within 24 to 48 hours of it being posted. We love our consumers, but Jack Daniel's consumers, they share every moment of their lives with us, both dressed and undressed. So if you can only imagine.
I just wanted to...
Go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, I just wanted to pick up on what Danielle said about the having the ethos and how you respond, because I think that's the thing that everybody forgets about. You can't teach common sense, and as you say, you can have every single guideline going, but if somebody just doesn't understand it, then they just can't deal with the customer service. So yeah, sorry if I cut it across there, Tammy.
No, that's fine.
I think it's a very good point. I like to think you hire for common sense and you train them in everything else, right? Okay, well, I think we've got time for one more question before we get booted off. It's a nice and easy one, this one. So there are organisations that are showing it's possible to comply with regulations and do great social media. So I'm going to ask each of you, I'll start with you, Danielle. What are some of the brands, or just the brands, that you admire the most in your chosen regulated industry, and why do you admire them?
I picked MBNA in the UK because I started working with them about 2.5 years ago, and they didn't have any social media at all because they were so risk averse. They were actually terrified of going into social. And in the time since then, they're now active on social media, but they're also committed to creating sort of real value for the customers based on the insights that they've got from the service that they're doing. So one of the things I noticed this week was they just announced a partnership with mobile phone provider in the UK, O2. And what they're going to be doing is providing auto alerts through mobile phones when customers go on holiday. So what happens normally is if you're going to go abroad, you have to let your credit card provider know, otherwise your card gets blocked, which is not great when you're in a strange country. So if you can take that hassle away and automate it so that as soon as your mobile roaming kicks in, your bank gets an alert that, oh, you're abroad, and your card doesn't get blocked. That's a real super innovation for the customer, and I think that is great customer care. And yeah, so for that reason, I'm going to select those guys. Come a long way. Very proud.
Okay, Lisa.
I know I probably should mention who I should do, but I'm actually going to mention Nationwide, and that's purely just because they were the first bank in the UK to do 24/7 Twitter coverage. And you know what? There's now a lot of people actually doing that in the finance industry, and I think it's great that they've actually recognised they need that customer service at that time.
And I think it touches on that ethos. I mean, Nationwide's, for our international audience, what's known as a building society, which is run for its members, pretty much by its members, because I think once you open an account with them, you own part of the building society, i.e. the bank. So I think that driving ethos of being for the customers clearly went through to the 24/7 customer service, which is just an interesting point. We'll move on to you, Monica, and finish with you, Tammy.
So one thing I just wanted to say, Danielle, that service that you just talked about would be amazing, because I'm currently in Mexico, and I luckily my bank was fine and it did not get declined, but I worried about that because I did not call them before I got down here. But another one that I love personally here in the U.S. is USAA. They have always been great for the customer service side for me personally on Twitter. If I ever have any issues, I can tweet at them and they give me a response. They're able then to pull that into their database on the back end. So when I call in, they know exactly why I'm calling if we weren't able to resolve it on Twitter. And so I love that. One in the healthcare industry that I do like is DaVita. And they do kidney dialysis. And one thing that I noticed with them this past week is with the huge snowstorm in New York, a lot of people weren't able to go anywhere. New York had a travel ban. So they were proactively tweeting out at people and making sure that they had a phone number available to them so that they could get to their treatment if it was immediately necessary or if they needed to postpone it or anything they could do to help them. So I just thought that was great, kind of in need of a crisis time. They were there and they were proactively trying to help their customers.
Oh, that's fantastic, definitely. And Tammy?
From a personal perspective, I think several of the airlines do a great job. I travel quite a bit in my job, and I think several of the airlines are doing a really super job with customer service and responding on social media to issues and helping people with their travel problems, I should say. From an alcohol perspective, I'm very proud of all of our brands, and I think Brown-Forman is probably the most conservative alcohol company in the world, but Jim Beam, Beam Suntory, is doing an excellent job with their social media as well, and I'm very proud of all of their efforts. They're a great partner.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Well, yeah, so I think we are coming to the end of this panel. Certainly to the audience, I hope you've learned as much as I have. I'm definitely walking away more educated than I was when I came in. Thanks to all of our panelists for sharing your expertise and experience with us today. We all really appreciate it. And I do also want to extend my huge appreciation to all the community and social media managers on this special day, especially those of you sharing your successes and failures to help us all learn from them. So thank you, and I don't know if our hosts are with us. Yes, they are. Hello.
All right, yeah, we're here. We're here. LA is not on the couch, but Seattle's here. So thank you very much, all of you guys. This was an absolutely amazing panel. There's a ton of information and there's a lot of questions that people have, and so I'm glad you guys could cover the tip of the iceberg for us. If you guys do have any more questions for anybody on this panel, feel free to chat with them on Twitter and ask them. And once again, congratulations to Blaze for being the 2016 CMGR Choice Award winner. And we look forward to seeing you in about 10 minutes for the next panel. See you later, guys.
Thanks, guys.